I was getting ready to relax, watch a movie or something. Hold on for a minute. Okay, my bad. Yeah, I was getting ready to relax, watch a movie or something. I came across something. Now, I think I mentioned this earlier, but I can't remember one of my videos earlier in the past. But whoever controls the energy controls the country. So what I'm saying to you, Joe Biden, I can never call him the other word, the P, the whatever, because I don't look at him like that. He signed executive orders. He signed away executive orders that President Trump signed for us being made here. Put it like that. And I found out another thing. Allegedly, I put it like that. Canada working with China. All kind of stuff that is crazy. But anyway, though, whoever controls the infrastructure like 5G, this all that stuff controls you. President Donald Trump made it so we don't have to rely on no other country for anything. Joe Biden is erasing that. This man gonna explain to you the dangers of these actions of Joe Biden. How will he handle this? We know how President Donald Trump handled it. Independence. We were independent in our resources. We was independent, put it like that. We need no gas for nobody, no electric, no gas, no nothing for nobody. But let's listen to this though. So it's what I'm trying to say to y'all is it's bigger than what they tell you. You gotta look at the whole picture. You gotta look at countries and who trying to control this. It's military minds. It's military games and this stuff, man. It don't have to be blood. It don't have to be battles. It could be like cyber war and cyber war or control the energy war. Who controls the power of the who controls your power, the energy, the internet, all that stuff. It comes into play. And President Donald Trump, man, it's crazy for real. Let's listen to this man. I ain't doing the whole thing, but let's listen to him though.
Remember now, the narrative for us is you got to wear two masks now, not just one mask, two masks. All right. Let me go over a couple of stories and go into some more questions again. Now, this is National Polls. They have an interesting story here. It says, this is related to China. It says Biden immediately removes, quote, China challenge as quote, policy issue on the State Department website. And this is interesting because, again, as I mentioned, it's one thing to make public statements. It's one thing for a politician to criticize another country and to make statements and so on. It's another thing for them to actually do things in action, to act on what they claimed. And this is an interesting move because we do see Biden on the surface still criticizing the Chinese Communist Party's persecution of Muslim Uyghurs, acknowledging it's a genocide, still showing some signs of siding with Japan, for example, against the Chinese Communist Party, but is also talking now about suggesting possibly ending sanctions against countries that are being hard hit by the virus. It's not clear if he means China by that. And also one of the moves he made when he first came into office, and it's only been a little over a week now, or close to a week, is removing the China challenge as a policy issue on the State Department website. Now, it's according to Natalie Winters with the National Pulse. It says, the site, state.gov, also revised China's country profile page to lead with U.S. relations with China as opposed to its predecessor, the Chinese Communist Party, threatening global peace and security. A January 19th archive of the site reveals 23 items as policy issues on a drop-down menu on the Trump administration's version of the site. In contrast, the Biden regime lists just 17. Among the issues flagged by the Trump administration was omitted from the Biden's new launching site include 5G security, the China challenge, illegal immigration, Iran, a dangerous regime, Nicaragua, a return to democracy, and Venezuela, a democratic crisis. Now, the suggestion in that is that Biden is going to have a different stance with these issues, and this is important on a few points. Now, with 5G, I know there's a lot of concerns about possible safety of 5G. The trajectory is right now that basically someone's going to build it. And the Chinese Communist Party is pushing very hard to have their infrastructure in place around the world and to have this under their own control. The Trump administration's former policy was to have Made in America 5G and to push for that as well. And remember as well that Japan and India teamed up as well to launch their own program for 5G. Basically, if 5G is not done by America, not done to some extent maybe by India and Japan, China's going to build it, China's going to own it, and China's going to control through it. Meaning that the CCP will control essentially internet infrastructure and anything picked up within this emitted technology, electromagnetic field emission. Anything within that field, of course, you can receive information as well, which is one of the national security concerns with it. The China challenge is, of course, the Trump administration's policy on dealing very strongly with the Chinese Communist Party. Biden does his removing this does suggest he's going to change his stance on that. Illegal immigration, of course, Democrats are always pretty clear on their stance with that. Open borders, essentially. And Biden saying now 8-year path to citizenship, meaning they have to vote him in again if they want him to pass this. And, 8 years. And Iran, a dangerous regime. Again, he's talked about renewing the Iran deal, which is interesting because after Trump pulled out of the Iran deal, even Europe, different European countries have been criticizing Iran of already violating the agreement with them. So the big question is, if Biden chooses to get back on it, how will he ensure that Iran follows it when they've already been violating it with other countries? Nicaragua, a return to democracy, of course. Right, trying to return Nicaragua to democracy does not seem to be on the plate now. And Venezuela, of course, as well, having fallen under socialism, a democratic crisis. It seemed to be the case also that he's changing his stance on that. Notably as well, I think it's the European Union or European countries have changed their recognition of the government in exile of Venezuela, suggesting that they may be on the track of acknowledging the socialist Venezuelan government as legitimate. Now, another one here, again, National Pulse. It says, Biden rescinds Trump order banning Chinese communist involvement in U.S. power grid. And this is important on a few different points as well. Again, Natalie Winters with the National Pulse. She said President Biden has revoked a Trump-era executive order that sought to keep foreign countries and companies out of America's bulk power systems, principally entities associated with the Chinese Communist Party, as part of his, quote, executive order on protecting public health and the environment and restoring science to tackle the climate crisis. Now, Biden's executive order, which executes key tenets of his climate change agenda, was released on the former Veep's first day in office. Section 7 of the massive order, which includes the revocation of the permit for the Keystone XL pipeline, also revokes several climate and energy-focused executive orders penned by Trump administration. I won't go too deep into this, but what does this mean? Well, there are many ways for a country to dominate another country. One of them is to control the institutions. Now, what is one of the main goals, stated goals of communism, right? Seize the means of production. If we were to look at the world right now, or let's say pre-Trump, who would you say controls the means of production? Who owns the factories? Who owns the supply chains? Who owns the natural resources? Well, The Chinese Communist Party, to a very large extent, owns the means of production, the factories, became essentially the manufacturing base of the world. And you could say that the ones they did not control, they were working very hard to control. That is one means of, for example, controlling other countries. You control their means of production. Now, we'll have to see what happens with Biden pushing for Made in America. This is part of it. But there are many other ways you can control a country. Subversion of the institutions, influence through corruption of their politicians, so on, so on. Chinese Communist Party has United Front Work Department working on that. But there's also the issue of controlling a country through energy. You might remember, going back a few years now, the New START treaty with Russia, for example, which we mentioned some of the issues with Russia again, Biden getting back into that. The Uranium One scandal, basically selling off America's nuclear energy sovereignty to Russia through that. One of the issues that came up during that time was that national security warnings of Russia during that time were warning that Russia was trying to use control of energy to control Europe, and particularly natural gas. In other words, the control of energy can be used to control a country. And we've seen now, even in the United States, that if a country goes against, if an individual or even a country, as we're seeing now with Google threatening Australia, threatening to shut off its search engine for Australians if they choose to force Google, for example, to have to pay their news agencies for using content. We've seen in the United States that if a company, a private company, decides to shut off its services to an individual or even a country because they disagree with a policy issue, that this somehow is okay. Now, what happens if the Chinese Communist Party controls those institutions? What happens if the Chinese Communist Party controls the internet infrastructure and there's no other competing entity with it? What happens if the Chinese Communist Party, for example, builds a nuclear power plant in the UK, and this private company one day says, we disagree with your political stance on China, and we will no longer be granting you service? And suddenly they shut off the energy in that entire country. This is the risk with these types of policies. We've seen Russia use this strategically. We saw China use it strategically against Japan when it came to the early days of the battle for the East China Sea, the Senkaku Islands or the Diaoyu Islands, when they, again, denied Japan access to rare earth minerals, which they need for their high-tech industry. We've seen that these controls of institutions and systems can be used as forms of power. And so Biden, now eliminating this Trump policy, protecting Americans from this type of subversion, is a pretty big deal, especially when we understand how the Chinese Communist Party is using this. Anyways.
Whoever controls the infrastructure, controls you. Joe Biden, excuse me, is erasing all that protect us, our sovereignty against this. Y'all voted for him. Not y'all. I don't know. Maybe you. But it's bigger. But y'all, let the media, no, I don't forget it. Wake up. Then, so let me play it in this way too, though. Lights, electricity. We don't control that, right? First Energy, our gas, Dominion East. They want to shut us off. We shut off. Because they control it. But lucky they ain't the foreign country.